I have the SharePoint list of clients. I'd like to create a folder for each of these clients, except for the inactive ones, in the clients document library of my SharePoint site. I also want to add a hyperlink to the client folder in the SharePoint list. Creating these folders manually and adding the hyperlink would be time-consuming and prone to errors. To do this quickly, I'll create a Power Automate flow. In my SharePoint list, I need to add a hyperlink column for the folder link. We'll start off by creating a manually triggered flow that will bulk create folders. Then I'll show you how to create an automated cloud flow that will create a new folder each time a new client is added to the list. In Power Automate, create a new instant cloud flow. Give your flow a name and select the manual trigger. Add a Get Items action. Select your site address and list name. Since I don't want to create folders for clients who are inactive, I'll use a filter query to omit those names. Click on Show Advanced Options. The filter query requires the internal name of the column. To find the internal name of a column, click on the gear icon and select List Settings. Click on the column name. In your browser's address bar, take a look at the end of the URL. Locate the text that appears after the equal sign. This is the text you need to use in your filter query. In most cases, it will match your column name. However, if you have spaces in your column name, it's always best to check what the internal name of your column is. Since I want to omit clients who are inactive, I'll use NE for not equal to and enter the word inactive between single quotes. Make sure that the text you type between the single quotes matches the text in your SharePoint list. In my case, the I in inactive is capitalized. I'll add a compose action to display the number of items returned from the Get Items action. I like to use compose actions in my flows to help with troubleshooting. To count the number of items returned from the action above, use the length function. Insert the value dynamic content from the action above. I'm going to save the flow and test it out. In my SharePoint list, I'll add a total count to the status column and filter out the inactive clients. It's showing 21. I'm going to verify this number with the number of items returned in my flow. It's a match. Before we continue building out this flow, I'm going to limit the number of items returned from the Get Items action. It's always good to limit the number of items returned when building out a flow to help speed up the flow run. I'm going to limit my top count to 3. Add and apply to each action. We'll use this action to loop through the items returned from the Get Items action. Insert the value dynamic content. Add a compose action. We'll use this compose action to store the name of the folder. This action is optional. If you'd like, you can enter the folder name right into the next action. For my folders, I'd like to prefix the name with the client ID. I'll insert the client ID dynamic content followed by a space and the client name. The client name is stored in the title column of the SharePoint list, so I'll insert the title dynamic content. Save the flow and give it a test. I'll review the folder names to ensure that the output is what I want. Add a Create New Folder action. Select your site address and document library name. In the folder path, I'll insert the outputs from the compose action above. If you've chosen not to use a compose action, insert the dynamic content you'd like to use for your folder name here. I'll save the flow and give it a test. The folders have been created. Next, we need to add a hyperlink for each folder in the SharePoint list. I'll delete these folders first. Add a send HTTP request to SharePoint action. Don't forget to rename your actions to keep things organized. We'll use this action to get the metadata type from the list that we'll need in another action. Select your site address. Leave the method as get. In the description box below, I've included a link to the JSON that I'll be using in the next couple actions. I'll copy the first URI text to my clipboard. Replace this text here with your list name. Run a test. This is the text that is needed for the next action. We'll be returning this text in an expression. Add another Send HTTP request to SharePoint action. Select your site address and change the method to Post. For the URI field, copy the second URI text to your clipboard. Paste it here. Replace this text with your list name. Double-click on the item ID text and replace it with the ID dynamic content from the Get Items action. For the headers, click on this icon to switch to text mode. Copy the headers JSON to your clipboard. Paste it here. You can press this icon to switch back to the key value mode. I'll copy the body JSON to my clipboard. Paste the text from your clipboard. In the outputs of the previous flow run, double-click on the list item entity text and copy it to your clipboard. For the type, we'll use an expression to get the type from the previous action. Enter a question mark, square brackets, and single quotes. Type in a lowercase d. Press the down arrow key to move your cursor to the end of the expression. Add another question mark, square brackets, and single quotes. Paste the text from your clipboard. Press the up arrow key to go to the start of the expression and insert the body from the previous action here. You need to replace this text with the internal column name. In my case, it's client folder. You can customize the hyperlink text here. I'd like to use dynamic content for my text. Customize this to suit your needs. I'll use the title dynamic content from the Get Items action to return the client name. I'll add a space and the word folder. Highlight this text here and insert the link to item dynamic content from the Create New Folder action. Save the flow and give it a test. The folders have been created. Let's check the SharePoint list. The hyperlinks have been added. I'll click on a hyperlink to test it out. To create the rest of the folders, I'll clear out the top count. Since we aren't using any variables in our flow, we can optimize it by turning on the concurrency control in the Apply to Each action. Let's test it out. Now that we've bulk created the client folders, let's create a new flow so that a client folder is created when a new client is added to the SharePoint list. Create an automated cloud flow. Give your flow a name and select the When an item is created trigger. Select your site address and list name. Add a Create New Folder action. Select your site address and document library name. For the folder path, I'll use the client ID, add a space, and the client name, which is stored in the title column. In the bulk create folder flow, I'll copy these two actions to my clipboard. Click New Step, My Clipboard. Ensure you're adding the actions in order. Replace this ID with the ID from the trigger in this flow. Replace the title dynamic content here with the title from the trigger of this flow. Replace the link to item with the link to item from the Create New Folder action in this flow. Let's save the flow and give it a test. In my SharePoint list, I'll add a new test client. In my particular case, I'm using the client ID in the folder name. For this reason, the client ID column should require a value. If you only want to create a new folder when the client is active or pending, you can add a condition. I'll insert the status value dynamic content. Leave this as is equal to, and I'll enter active. Add another row and repeat the steps above, and I'll enter pending. I'll drag these actions into the Yes branch. Save the flow and run a test. This flow works great for creating new folders and adding the hyperlink to your SharePoint list. If you found this video helpful, please consider giving this a like. What if you already have folders that exist and need to add the hyperlink to your SharePoint list? I'll show you how to do this in another video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. Thanks for watching.